Yesterday I was at my 103-year-old grandmother's funeral, and it was quite an event. And there was a sea of faces and a sea of memory. But we're talking this morning about identity. I had an incredible upbringing, an incredibly loving family, a family that always believed in me, cheered us on. It was sort of, if you can think of perfect family, to be brutally honest, I was blessed with it in a humanly real way. But one of the questions that's always still haunted me as a kid was, who am I? Who am I? And I think it's one of the key issues that we've got to address, and really that's what we're looking at when Mike talks about arise, shine, for your light has come. You've got to know who you are before you can turn your light on. And there's no way any of us will ever arise unless we have a real sense of who we are. And I guess as a child growing up, even in that incredibly supportive environment of a strong family around us, fifth generation Kiwis, we didn't come yesterday. My grandmother's parents came as pioneers to New Zealand in the very, very early days. And so all sorts of interesting stories spilled out yesterday. But who am I? Who am I? Was the question that used to so often go round and round in my mind and in deep within me as a kid. I want to show you how important identity is. If you go right back to the beginning of the Bible in Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve, a man and a woman. That's it. Now there's the extreme of the woman sort of movement. Yeah, Adam was a guy. Now this is a new concept. Yeah, Adam was a guy and Eve was a woman. Okay, we just really get that straight. Yeah, keep that straight. But Adam and Eve lived in a perfect environment. Absolutely incredible, and they had total ownership of that place. They went around. Adam was a part of naming the animals. He was given dominion over that. He was involved in a perfect setting, he and his wife. And yet something happened that destroyed it. And it came down basically to a number of things he was conned out of. And the number one thing he was conned out of was his identity. I want to read you from Genesis 3 and verse 5. It said, the old serpent, the spirit of this world came along and said to him, you won't die if you do what God didn't tell you to do. He said to Eve, for God knows that when you eat of the tree, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. The spirit of this world promised something that was never going to happen. Adam or Eve were never going to be like God. That He challenged their identity, what you could become. And I think when we look at what happened and the shattering that went on in the Garden of Eden through sin, their identity was lost. I want to look at two things that were outcomes, incredibly negative outcomes of that sense of the loss of identity. Genesis carries on, and the man and his wife heard the sound after they'd sinned, and clearly someone's trying to get in. The man and his wife heard the sound of God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord among the trees of the garden. The Lord called to the man, where are you? No longer is that asking, who are you? It's now actually, where are you? They were lost. And he answered, I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. For the first time ever in Adam or Eve's life, they experienced a thing called fear. They had never experienced fear before. They had nothing to be fearful of. But suddenly, as the spirit of this world had robbed them of their identity and they'd sold out and begun to live their own way without God, disobedient, they'd lost who they were. And for the first time ever, humanly speaking, fear entered the human heart. And it's interesting to think of, but our identity, fear is such a destructive thing in our identity. When we know who we are, when we have confidence, fear has no place. It says perfect love casts out fear. But that's so important that we realize that fear is not to be part of our lives. And the second thing that comes, obviously their fear, and they hid themselves from God. But I think the ultimate thing that came in that time was suddenly they looked and saw a world and themselves as deficient. They saw lack. They sensed their nakedness. They sensed being uncovered or exposed. They realized, and suddenly they focused on what they didn't have. Arise, shine, for your light has come. When we start believing the spirit of this world, they'll tell us everything we haven't got and everything we aren't. And I want to be honest, stand here, and there's just this huge smile on the inside of me, because particularly in the early days, banks laughed at us. Banks laughed at a church who their only income was what people gave them if they felt like it. And you sit with a bank manager and you say, we're looking at borrowing some money. Is your bank likely to lend us any? And it was almost like the snigger. No, it was all very professional and it wasn't quite that external. But, inside you knew what was going on. We don't lend to people or organisations that depend on donations, sir. Funny thing, it's turned so much. And these days, to be honest, there's probably 3 banks that have, courted our business. Elim through New Zealand, as the business managers have got together with the different churches through New Zealand, there's a huge amount of business now going on by banks to Elim, New Zealand. Huge land holdings, huge sense of movement of what God has done in these last 10 or 15 years. And again, if you believe what sometimes the spirit of this world will try and drop on you, who are you? You're irrelevant, you're this, you're that, you're nothing. If you believe that stuff, it will